All right, welcome to day 3 of wonderful snowy icy extravaganza. So we get to do 3 days of virtual note taking, which I'm sure you guys are very excited for. So the plan is, keep adjusting the plan. Monday, everything should, I would think, be fine. So we're going to be meeting again on Monday in person. I imagine everything should be melted by then, so I don't see any issues there. But we'll do GCA 1 together on Monday, okay? And then we'll do quiz number 1 on Wednesday, since you guys don't meet on Tuesday. So that's how it's going to look. So we're going to do GCA 1 together on Monday. We'll do the first quiz on Wednesday, and then we'll still do GCA 2 on Friday. So essentially, the only thing is we're just doing these 3 days of notes that we're going to do anyways, just, in advance instead of, after GCA 1 and the quiz, But, hey, what can you do, right? So last time we went through all the amortization tables, which, everyone, I'm sure, loves that one. So that was kind of the last thing we did. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, you should definitely take a look. And then right after that, we kind of had these kind of other topics. We kind of talked about a little bit of an adjustable rate mortgage or an ARM. We talked about closing costs, and I had a whole conversation about all these different fees that are on there and things you can see. And then the last thing we kind of mentioned was talking about, you have like property taxes and usually property insurance. And stuff like that. And usually what people do, and this is optional, is you can roll your mortgage in what's called an escrow. And what that does is you make your mortgage payment, but in that payment is also included money that's allocated to pay towards your property taxes and property insurance, right? Because if you have a loan, they're going to require you to have property insurance, because if you burn the house down, they don't want to lose their money, right? So this escrow is nice is because you don't have to think about it. You don't have to wait till the end of the year to pay all those things and make sure you're saving for it. The lender kind of takes care of this for you. So you can call this a reserve account. Most times it's called an escrow account. And the idea for an escrow, it's used for a singular purpose. So you can't really use that money for anything else. So in this case, the escrow will only be usable, and the money in that fund could only be usable for your property taxes and also your property insurance. So usually what happens is, sometimes have to recalculate those things, right? Because property insurance could go up. Property insurance could, potentially go down, although that'd be kind of a rare one to see. But technically both things are possible. Same thing too when it comes to your property insurance, right? I mean, chances are you probably don't own a home, but what's been happening over the past couple years is, because of the stuff in Florida, then now these wildfires in California, right? Insurance companies have been shelling out a lot of money here, so they've been increasing rates across the board, and then they're also going to say inflation because, for example, the cost to build a home is higher, so if they had to completely rebuild your home, that cost is increased. So, they just have all these great excuses to increase your payments, right? And so the lender's job is to try to make sure that the escrow account has the funds it needs, okay? And so sometimes they can adjust and change. Your mortgage payment is always going to stay the same, but those extra fees could go up. That extra amount can go up that you're kind of setting aside to help pay for these things. Now, what's nice is if the escrow account has like too much money in it, right? So like, you've been making payments over time, but in this particular case, you didn't use all the funds because maybe they overestimated some of the costs. When you sell your home, this escrow account will be given back to you. Okay, so any money that you have in there that's kind of sitting in there does go back to you. So it's not like you pay it and you lose it type of thing. So generally speaking, I think, in my personal opinion, if you're buying a home, the escrow account is probably the most convenient. It saves you the hassle trying to remember to save money for those property taxes and insurance. Okay, so that's a word from the wise there. Okay, now because this escrow account is adding in some extra costs, okay, if we calculate a mortgage payment, we're going to have to be able to understand how we can add in those extra fees, right? Because mortgages are paid every month, so those fees have to be kind of broken down into, 12 equal payments, right? Because the idea is you're trying to break down the cost over a year, okay? So if you're making 12 mortgage payments in a year, your taxes and insurance are also going to be paid over that same year period, okay, over those 12 months. So this first example here we're going to take a look at, they're already telling us here the actual monthly amount. So they're saying that, hey, this person James, they borrowed $250,000 at 3.8% for 30 years, and we already know the payment is $1,164.89, which should sound familiar because we used this same type of number previously for another question, so that number should look familiar. Now, what's different though in this particular case is we are including two different things. They're telling us that there's an annual property tax of $1,087, and there's an annual insurance of $1,258. Now, what we're going to have to do here is we're going to take both these amounts and we're going to have to divide them by 12 to see kind of how much those amounts are per month. All right, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to take those two amounts and we're going to go ahead and divide them by 12. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pop open the whiteboard. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead back to our nice blue color here. All right, so we know that the monthly payment was 1,160. Trying to remember it. 64. Yep, 64.89. You see, even I remember it. 64.89. Okay, this is the monthly payment right now. Now, what we're going to be doing is we need to figure out the taxes per month. And then we're also going to have to figure out the insurance per month. Okay. Luckily, this is pretty easy to find because we're just taking those amounts, then divide by 12. So we go back. So the property taxes was $1,087. We take $1,087. We divide it by 12. This is going to produce the monthly amount for each of those. So it looks like we're going to get a monthly amount when it comes to the taxes of $90.58. Whoops. Try writing the 8 a little bit too soon. Fix that. And then for the insurance, same idea. We go back. How much are they charging? Looks like $1,258. So we'll go ahead, we'll write that down. We divide that by 12. And the cost of that per month will be $104.83. Okay, so what we're doing is essentially breaking down these costs over a 12-month period, okay, by dividing by 12. Now, if I want to find out the total payment, which this question is pretty much asking, hey, what's James' total monthly payment including the tax insurance because he has an escrow account? Well, it's pretty easy. All we got to do is just take all three of these things and just add them up. Okay, so we're going to take these three things, add them up. So we take that $1,164.89 plus $90.58 plus $104.83. The total is going to be $1,306.30. Whoops, I'm blind. It's $60. That's my fault. So it should be $1,360.30. Okay, so this will be your monthly payment. Okay, so again, that's taking into account the mortgage, which is the first number. Okay, then we're looking at the taxes and then the insurance all lumped together. Okay, So you will have to do a little bit of work to try to figure out what the taxes and insurance are per month. But you're just dividing by 12. It's probably the easiest thing to kind of have to kind of figure out. Now, in this particular example, they were nice and generous enough to provide the monthly payment. But of course, math has got to be always difficult, right? So in the next example, we do not have that case. Okay, so we look at the next example. Okay, we had these two individuals. They are trying to see if they can afford a home that costs around $2,000 a month. Okay, so they want to see in this scenario essentially if the cost is going to be over or under that amount. So can they afford it, right? So the home that they really like is $300,000. They saved up a 20% down payment for this home, and they're pre-qualified for a 20-year fixed rate mortgage at 4.5%. And they also tell us the property tax insurance. Okay, so before we get involved in freaking out about all the different things on here, let's just focus on the mortgage first. Okay, they do not tell us the payment, so we have to find that first. So we're going to have to find big R. Okay, using our handy dandy formula. Okay, so before we can do that, this question does have something we haven't really dealt with before, and this has a down payment. We haven't seen this in a couple of days. Now, the way this is pretty much working is the house price is $300,000, but the down payment is 20%. Okay, so we got to take 20% off of this amount. Okay, so if you take 20% of 300,000, you're looking at 60,000. So realistically, they're really borrowing 240. Okay, so since they're borrowing 240, not 300,000, that is going to adjust our answer. Okay, so you have to kind of take into account we're minusing off the down payment. Okay, so essentially, if it's 20%, it's minus 30,000 twice, or minus 60,000 once, however you want to look at it. Either way, no matter how you cut it, they're financing 240. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at doing that here. So if we go ahead and scroll this down, we are going to look at principal of $240,000. We also need R. We also need T. T was 20 years, and I'm pretty sure the rate was it 4.5? Yeah, 4.5%. So it'd be 0.045. Now, we're going to use this all information to make the payment for the mortgage itself first, and then we'll worry about the taxes and insurance after. Okay, so again, it's big R equals our principal, 240,000, times our rate, 0.045, divided by 12, okay, divided by 1 minus, and it's going to be 12 over 12.045 raised to the power of, and this is going to be 12 times t, so it's 12 times 20. Okay, again, this is using our formula. When you do this enough like me, you pretty much get this thing stuck in your brain. So, you kind of do the same thing over and over and over and over again. All right. Now, we're going to do just like before. We're going to calculate the top number, calculate the bottom number, make it a little bit easiest for us to do in the calculator, then divide them. Okay, so starting at the top number, you should get a nice number of 900. So that's nice. So the top number is going to be $900 even. Okay, and then the bottom, we have to calculate this. This is usually some weird decimal, so I'm expecting it to be at least somewhat peculiar. You should get 0.59274 5388. So if you were to divide these with each other, so that 900 divided by that wonderful decimal, you will get the amount of $1,518.36 if we round to the nearest penny. Now, if this is the only number we cared about, they need to be under $2,000 to afford the home. So far it's looking good. However, we do have two other things to consider, right? We have to consider the taxes, okay? And we have to consider the insurance, do INS for short. So we need to figure out, what are these costs, because that's going to have to be added in with our total payment, right? And as long as those three add up to be less than $2,000, looks like they can afford the home, okay? So let's see. Going back. They assume, or they're estimating, the property taxes to be $3,500 and the insurance to be $2,200, okay? So it's going to be $3,500 for the taxes. So we're going to take $3,500 divide by 12. That would be the monthly amount per taxes. $2,200 divided by 12 will be the monthly amount for the insurance. So let's see, how close are they going to make it? So it'll be $291.67 for the taxes per month. And then for the insurance per month, looking at $183.33. So the total payment, including the escrow, is going to be equal to these three things added up. So it'd be $1,518.36 plus $291.67 plus $183.33, and the total is going to be $1,993.36. So if they need their payment to be under $2,000, they are barely making it, man. Barely. So yes, they can afford it, okay? But if they really need to be under $2,000, this is kind of cutting it close, okay? But that's the thing you need to consider, right? One thing to take for this course when moving forward, and you're gonna buy a house in the future, hopefully, if that's in your plans, you need to take in consideration the taxes, insurance, okay? The monthly payment for the mortgage is one thing, but it's easy to overlook those extra two costs. So you want to make sure you do try to include all three if possible, okay? And so in this case, this is the payment, so the answer would be yes. They can afford it. Because the question is really asking, can they even do this or not? Right? Can the Smiths afford their dream home? Answer is yes. I mean, they can, but it's close, right? So if they have any changes in property taxes or insurance and it goes up, they might be in jeopardy of, maybe it being unaffordable. So realistically speaking, it's a yes, right? Technically it's a yes, but it would have to be a big thing to make sure they can do, because if that $2,000 is pretty firm, I mean it's cutting it close. They're within $7. So I mean it's tight, right? Tight. So but yeah, so this 13.4 section was all about, can we calculate a mortgage payment? Do we understand amortization and how that plays into the mortgage payment? And then we also have this stuff of escrow, right? And, for one of the sections here that we cover in this course, this is probably one of the more useful things that you actually might do in your lifetime, right? Everyone loves to kind of complain about math not being useful and all that fun stuff, right? And this is one of those cases where we're covering a topic that is pretty, out there, right? In real estate, selling houses, or even in lending, right? This is stuff that happens all the time, every day. There's people going through this process, right? And so this kind of gives you an idea of kind of how it's calculated, and, maybe if you feel comfortable enough, maybe you can actually do your own calculations, right? And you can kind of verify to make sure the people communicating to you the costs are actually telling you the truth, right? Not necessarily that they're trying to lie to you, but verifying that they did it correctly themselves, right? Because everyone can make a mistake from now and then, right? So that's kind of how that goes. Now, I am going to talk about here briefly, okay, 15.1. We're probably not going to get into it too much, okay, but we might go through the whole first example. We're going to at least do half of it. We'll see kind of how I feel here on doing this. And the reason why I'm a little hesitant about covering this first example entirely is there's a couple things with this type of topic that could be a little difficult to understand because it's a little bit different. But we're talking about like different types of voting methods, okay? And two of these voting methods are, I think, pretty easy, and there's two that are a little bit more interesting. We'll put it that way. So what we're gonna do first, we're gonna talk about all four methods, okay? And we're gonna do at least the first two parts of example one, and then I'll take a look at the time and I'll see, if I want to go through the whole example. Well, we might still do the whole example, but we see. I don't want to try to, blow the hat off your heads here too soon. But essentially, when there's voting, right, we just had an elections past year. When it comes to voting, we typically think of only one type of voting, which is you write the name of the person you like, you put it in the basket, they tally it up, and then whoever has the most votes win, right? And that's pretty much what most people think about voting. However, there are technically other methods that you can use for voting, okay? Some have their own pros and cons. Okay, some of them are maybe a little bit more accurate when it comes to people's feelings when comparing candidates. Some of them are a little bit more interesting. We'll put it that way. But they're all unique, and they do have their purposes and their logic behind them. Okay, so the first method here, the plurality method, this is essentially what you think of when it comes to voting. So whenever someone thinks about voting for something, this is pretty much the method that comes to mind. Each person votes for one candidate. They tally it up. Whoever has the most wins. Now, there is a key distinction here. This is bullet 3. A majority is not required. Okay, this is very important. For a plurality method, majority is not required, meaning if, let's say there's like 8 candidates and the person who won only had 40% of the vote, they still win, although technically it's not majority. To be majority, it has to be over 50%, okay? So more than half the votes. If you only have 40% of the votes, you don't technically have a majority, okay? And this is why when you're looking at, races, and again, this depends on state to state. So some of you guys are in different states, there's different rules because, voting's interesting. There are some states that rule that, let's say it's a local election for a mayor of a town or a city, or maybe it's like a local state representative. Sometimes they have rules where they have to have a majority, okay? And what they do is they can have a situation where, let's say there's like 6 candidates, and the candidate that won only had 45% of the vote. They didn't have a majority, so what they'll do is they'll knock it down to the last 2 candidates, so the one that got in first, one got in second, and then they do a revote, okay, and they call it a runoff, and then they hope that their supporters come back out to the polls, right? And it's kind of a big deal, and that's because the way they do the voting is using this method, but they tweak it by having a majority, okay, and it's a little interesting because it makes you have to go out and vote twice, which is not ideal, and it causes a lot of confusion. So usually, if you're looking for a majority, okay, the method that is better for that is called the Hare method, okay, and there's actually 2 states that use this method, okay. Alaska and Maine are 2 states that use this method. So if you were kind of maybe watching the presidential, I can't think of the word. Like when they're voting for everything. So, and you're kind of trying to keep track of like all the delegates. You look at the map, it's all crazy. Okay, you might have noticed like Alaska takes a long time to process their votes. And, there's a couple reasons for that. But one of the reasons is they use this Hare method. Okay, and what the Hare method does is you actually rank all your candidates. So let's say you had 5 candidates. Instead of picking one of the 5, you write it down on a piece of paper, you turn it in, you actually give them all 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th places, okay? And what they do is they go through multiple rounds. So they do round 1. They tally all the votes, okay? Just like they do for the previous method. Now, the difference, though, is if there's not a majority, what they do is they take the person with the least amount of votes, and they pretty much eliminate them off the count, and they retally. Okay, and the idea is everybody who picked that person came in last as their number 1 candidate, those people get recounted using their number 2 candidate. And sometimes their number two candidate might be the person who had the lead. Sometimes it's not. Okay, and they have to recount. And this can happen multiple times. Okay, so until there's a majority decision, meaning over 50% of the votes or voters pick that person, they'll keep going through these rounds. Okay, so round one, they count them all up. If there's no majority reached, they eliminate the lowest scoring person and they retally. Okay, and they check it again. Is there a majority? And they keep doing it over and over again until they satisfy all the conditions. Okay. So that's going to be the Hare method. Okay. What can happen is when you're looking at both these methods, sometimes they have the same winners, sometimes they don't. Okay, this really depends on how it goes. Not having the majority could be impactful. Okay, if the person was using this first method and they had majority, the Hare method will produce the same result. Okay, even if they don't have majority, they can still produce the same result, but there is a little bit of a room for an underdog to kind of win, if that makes sense. Option 3, this is a pairwise comparison. The best way I can describe this to you is this is kind of like a head-to-head matchup. Okay, it ranks people just like the Hare method. Okay, so the way the vote is cast is the same, but instead of looking at it as a tally, they go head-to-head. So what they do is they go, okay, candidate 1 versus candidate 2, and they see how many people like candidate 1 over candidate 2, and they determine a winner. Then they do candidate 1 versus candidate 3. And then they do candidate 1 versus candidate 4. And they look at every possible pairing between the candidates. This is interesting because it's kind of reducing it down to a head-on-head matchup. But you have to think about all the different pairs you can have. And this is a little bit difficult, okay? There's a way to find this answer, and it's not terrible, okay? But it's a little bit requiring some math, all right? But essentially, we got to try to make pairs. So we got to make as many pairs as possible between all the candidates until we have all the pairs there. So this one's a little bit tricky because you got to make sure you have all the pairs. Okay, the fewer number of candidates, the less pairs you have. When you have, like, let's say 8 candidates, there's a lot of pairs you have to keep track of. So it can kind of get a little overwhelming with this method. Okay, but essentially, like I said, they compare the pairs and they see, all right, who wins those one-to-one matchups. And what they do is they look at a tally of how many one-to-one matchups were won. So if candidate A had 3 wins, candidate B had 2 wins, and candidate C had 1 win, and candidate D had 0 wins, whatever, okay, whoever had the most wins in their head-to-head matches would be the winner, okay? Very different compared to the previous 2 methods. Okay, the other 2 methods are a tallying process. This has a tally, but it's more like who is more favorable between each other, okay? And then you got this one, the border method. This is when everyone gets a little bit confused because this is a little bit of a logistical nightmare. But essentially, again, they rank the candidates, okay? And what happens is they look at who's ranked first, second, third, fourth, fifth, so on and so forth, and they assign points. So instead of a tally, there's points. And the way it works is, let's just assume you had 5 candidates. First place gets 4 points. That's what this is saying. It's n minus 1 point. So there's 5 candidates. There's first place always gets 1 less. So first place gets 4. Second place gets 3. Third place gets 2. Fourth place gets 1. And last gets 0. And what they do is we kind of assign points. So it's kind of like a game. So depending on how they're ranked, they give them points. They get the next vote in. They assign points, so on and so forth. Okay? And then whoever has the highest points wins. Okay? And what can happen is you can look at, the same type of votes that are sent in, and you can use these 4 different methods, and you could technically get 4 different people winning. Okay, which seems kind of ridiculous, right? But the reason why we have these different methods is they do different things, right? We kind of do this polarity method for the most part because it's just easier to do, right? There's only one person you worry about. You count them once. There's no extra things. The Hare method's a little complicated, right? You have multiple options. You kind of have to sift through. There's multiple rounds. However, it kind of makes you, the voter, pick in an order of preference. And so it might be a little bit more representative to what the people are thinking. But again, it's not super popular. Only 2 states are doing it. And there are also 2 states that probably have some of the lowest populations. So, go figure. Plus, the way they assign their delegates are a little strange too. So they probably have some reason behind it. Anyways, and then pairwise is interesting because it kind of forces the candidates to be 1-to-1. So, maybe candidate A is better than candidate B, but maybe not against candidate C, right? So it's kind of interesting how they do that calculation. Okay, and the Borda method is like, kind of the other alternative we see where we assign points based off first, second, third, fourth, right? So that's usually your 4 different methods. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to take like some votes, and we're going to try to figure out who wins in each of these methods. These first 2 are the easiest because they're not super complicated, okay? But the pairwise is a little bit different, and the Borda method's also a little bit different, okay? So we'll take a look at them. So let's look at page 22, okay? So on page 22, they have a 13-member committee, and they're selecting a chairperson, okay? There's only 3 people that actually want to be this chairperson, okay, in the committee. You have this person named Amy, you got this person named Byron, they got this person named Corey. Ironically, their names start with A, B, C, so we have candidate A, candidate B, candidate C, okay? Now, what we're looking at here in this table is kind of the results of how people voted. And what's happening here is there's a couple people that voted very similarly. So, for example, there was 3 people that voted A first, C second, B last. Okay? There's 4 people that voted C first, B second, A last. There's 2 people that voted B, then A, then C. And then 4 that voted B, C, then A. Okay? Now, sometimes this ranking matters, sometimes it doesn't. Okay? So for the plurality method, so for this method, we are going to be looking at only the first option. Okay, we don't care about who they thought was second best or third best. We only care about option 1. Okay, so in this case, it's pretty easy, right? 3 people voted for A, 4 people for C, 2 for B, 4 for B. So it looks like there's 3 votes for A, 4 votes for C, and 6 for B. Okay, so who had the most? It was B, right? So the winner has to be Byron here with these 6 points. Okay, pretty simple. Okay, I don't even have to write anything down. Again, we're looking at this first option, so 3 A's, 4 C's, 6 B's, because we had to add them up. So there's person B, so Byron here, they had the most votes with 6 votes, or 6 points, okay? Now, technically, this is not a majority, but we don't care. Okay, this method doesn't care about majority, so whoever has the most points, that's it, they're done, okay? Now, if we look at the Hare method, it gets a little bit more complicated, right? Because now we're needing a majority, okay? So, in this case, we can't say it's Byron just quite yet because 6 votes is not half, okay? So you have to have more than half. So the way this is going to work is if we take a look here, we'll try it out. So we know that if there's 13 people, so 13 voters, let's just say, if we divide that by 2, we get 6.5. So really we need 7 to win. This is always rounded up. Okay, it's the nearest whole number. So we need 7 to win. So since half of 13 is 6.5, we need to be over that. So the only way that's possible if we have 6 votes. So in round 1, we already kind of did this. A received 3 votes. B received 6 votes. Didn't mean to do equals there. And then person C received, I'm trying to remember here, 4 votes. So in this case, B did have the most, but this is less than 7, so there's no winner. We can't declare a winner. So how it works is we're going to have a round 2. However, in round 2, we eliminate the person with the least amount of votes. So in this case, A will be eliminated, and now we're only looking at B and C. So we're looking at B only and C only. Now this gets a little bit interesting because these first 3 people voted for A. That was their top pick, but they lost. They're done. They kicked out. So now we have to look at their second option. Well, they picked C. So now we have 3 people for C, and we had 4 people for C, so that's 7, and then the 6 people for B. So if we take a look at this, 6 is 7 people, but C is now 7 people. So B is 6, and C is now 7, right? And what happened is those 3 people that really wanted A didn't really work out because they got the least amount of votes. And since our backup plan was C, C is now the winner. Okay? So in this case, Corey wins with 7 points. And they might call them hair points, but they win with 7 points. Okay? And we can see how we got 2 different answers, right? So Byron won the first method because we didn't care about majority. But here, since we have a majority we care about, Byron can't win the first round. So when we eliminate the lowest scoring person out of the race and we recalculate the totals, it looks like Corey now is winning. Okay, and he wins. So we can have a difference of answers here based off majority. Now, if the first person, okay, wins in the majority in round 1, then the hair and polarity method will be the same. Okay, so that's how that's going to work. So they'll be both be the same. Now, the more interesting ones. What about the pairwise? We'll do this one. We might hold off on the border for now. We'll do pairwise. Okay, so for pairwise, we have 3 people we're comparing. So if we do all the pairs, we can pit A against B. So Amy can go against Byron. We can see how they pan out. Amy can go against Corey. And then Byron can go against Corey. And that should be all the pairs. Okay? So if we do the pairwise, it's interesting. So we'll scroll down here. This is the hair method, by the way. So we remember that. Next one we're going to do is going to be the pairwise. Okay. So if we make our pairs, we have A versus B. That's our first pair. Then we're going to have A versus C. This will be our next pair. And then we're going to have B versus C. And you have to ask the question, are these all the possible pairs we can do? AB, AC, BC. Is there anything else? Well, if we did CB, that's the same as this. CA is the same as this. BA is the same as this. So it looks like these are all the pairs. Now the way we do this is we're going to look at the votes. And we're going to see, does A beat B and does B beat A? So in this first round, these 3 people put A above B. So in this first round, A's getting 3 votes right there. Okay? What about the next group? So these 4 people put B above A. These 2 did the same thing, put B above A. And these 4 put B above A. So we have 4, 2, and 4. So we have 4, 2, then 4. So it looks like there was 3 total votes for A to put A above B. And then there was 10 total votes to put B above A. So who wins? Looks like B's going to win the first round. So B wins this first head-to-head. Okay? Now we do it again. This time we're comparing A to C. So we know that those first 3 people put A first, so they're going to be those 3. Now, the second match, or the second group of people, I should say, 4 people put C above A. 3, go ahead and put that there. So it's going to be 4 going here. Then on the next one, these 2 put A above C. And these last 4 do C above A. So you have 2. We have 4. So there's 2 more for A, 4 more for C. So it says a total of 5 versus 8. Okay. So it seems like, again, A loses, C wins. So right now, A lost all the matchups it was pitted against. B won once, and C won once. So, ultimately, B versus C is going to determine who is the winner. Okay, so we go back. Okay, in this first group, these guys put C above B. So that's 3 of them. In the next group, these 4 put C above B. And this next group put 2 above B above C. And then these last ones do 4 B above C. So it looks like we have 3, then 4 for C, then 2 and 4 for B. Okay, so it's going to be 3. Whoops, it's wrong color. Forgot to change it over. So it's going to be 3, then 4 for C, and then 2 and 4 for B. So it looks like it's 6 versus 7. So it seems like C wins. Now, if we interpret these results, A had 0 wins, B had 1 win, and C had 2 wins. So who did better? Well, it seems like to us, or to me, right, C is the winner. So if we did a pairwise comparison, Corey wins with 2 points. So they get assigned a point for each time they win, right? So A got 0 points, B got 1 point, C got 2 points. And so we can determine Corey is the winner. Now, there is that Borda method. We're going to not do that one for right now because I don't want to overwhelm you with everything we went over so far. We're pretty much on schedule, so if I don't cover it, it's fine. We can work on it together. I'd rather do that one in person anyways because it looks more confusing than it should, but it's kind of like a dilemma when it comes to organizing the problem, okay? But when it comes to these methods, right, our first method here, you're just doing a regular tally, whoever has the most wins. For the second one, the hair method, essentially it's the same thing. We're doing a tally, but we want to have majority. So if there isn't a majority met, we have to recalculate by eliminating the weakest link and recalculate it again. So we had to do two total rounds. So we go back up here, right? We did the first round. We couldn't determine a winner because there wasn't a majority met because we need at least 7 to win. But in round 2, I forgot to write 2 here. Too bad someone was in there to yell at me from across the screen. We'll fix that real quick. So round 2, there we go. We determined C1 because those people that voted for A ended up voting for C as their second pick, right? And then when it comes to pairwise, this one's a little tricky because you have to make pairs. So you need to determine how many pairs there are. So we have one pair A versus B, another pair A versus C, and a third pair B versus C. And we determine in the first pair, B wins, second pair C won, third pair C won, which gives us a total of 2 wins to be the most for C. And so Corey wins that one too. So far, didn't mean to zoom in there. So far, Corey won 2 of them, while Byron only won 1 of them, and Amy's won nothing. So far, it seems like Corey's winning most of these comparisons, but we'll see what happens to the Borda method. We'll do that be Wednesday. Okay, so after the quiz on Wednesday, we'll pick this back up and kind of wrap it up from there. But in the meantime, hopefully you've been taking a look at that my math lab stuff. I haven't heard anybody having issues getting in and stuff recently, so hopefully everyone is in there and need to be. But if you haven't got in there, you need to do that ASAP, so you're not falling behind on the work. Okay, but hopefully you took some time here to try some of those problems. Go ahead, work on some of it over the weekend. We will be doing GCA 1 on Monday. Okay, and again, GCA 1's only on sections 13.1 to 13.2. This 13.4 section we finished today will be on GCA 2, which is going to be Friday. Okay, but if you have any questions, let me know, and we'll continue this on Wednesday, and then we'll be focusing on doing some of that GCA stuff on Monday.